Welcome back to our panel discussion, Data-Centric Approaches to Government in the Cloud, sponsored by Avnet Government Solutions and NetApp, here on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. Our guests today are Harry Lee, the Deputy Chief Information Officer at the Census Bureau. Walter Harris is the Chief Operating Officer at the FDA. Raj Rana is the Senior Systems Engineering Manager for Partner Ecosystems at NetApp. And Darren House, the Chief Technology Officer at Microtech and the former Director of Technology Solutions at Avnet Government, and Stephen Hernandez, the Chief Information Security Officer for the Office of Inspector General at Health and Human Services. And we've been talking about data and data in the cloud, especially data in the hybrid cloud today. And I wanted to get into the issues of performance, because you've got networks, you've got different architectures, storage subsystems, all of the components that contribute to latency and application performance for the user between that user and wherever that data might be. And so let's talk about some of the issues that you see coming up in performance and how you mitigate them, especially, again, in this hybrid environment where the data could literally be anywhere at any given moment. Harry, why don't we start with you?
All right, Tom, you mentioned architecture. And one of the key things we're looking at is cloud architecture, really getting smart about cloud and how to truly architect solutions that can leverage cloud, but also make sure that we deal with security issues we talked about before and how we deal with back-end data center data and applications. So one of the things that we do from a cloud architecture perspective is, one, where's the data? Where are the applications? If there are some latency expectations, how to mitigate those. And if you can't mitigate them, make sure the applications understand and are tolerant to the latency so they don't
crash.
Crash, yes. So from an optimization perspective, look at maybe some compression technologies, some WAN optimization to support the potential latency.
So WAN optimization means like pre-caching data at the either end so that it's commonly used, or so you're not sending everything back and forth?
Either end compression could be another way to optimize your traffic over your network. Look, sometimes applications and data may need to be co-located depending on the needs of that app. Commercial caching providers or caching provided by the cloud service providers is a way also to deal with the issue of performance and latency.
So you might actually have to go the opposite of deduplication if you want to have co-located data. You might even might be smart to duplicate it in a couple of places just for purposes of better performance.
Replication, mirroring, different ways to provide data access at different locations rather than all located at one central location.
So then the problem becomes, does it all match the replicated?
Correct. Yeah. So large distributed databases would be problematic, I think, in a cloud environment. So again, know your architecture, where cloud is a viable alternative to deliver the solution and the performance you need. Okay,
a lot of questions there. Walter, you must be thinking about that also.
Well, actually, I had a question, a response lined up, but now you made me change that. I think it's critical for FDA, and I think it's any of us on the panel, that we test the full limits of cloud. I mean, FDA, once again, it's this whole notion of having data systems that are dispersed geographically all over the place. And we need, and I think our customers are going to require us that we have on-demand service from a cloud service provider. We're going to have to test this to the ultimate limits. That's one of them. I think the need to be able to convert what we currently have into a workable model. I mean, FDA is working with OpenFDA, which is a great testing ground for us, but we've never taken it to the ultra limit to see just how this works. But then there's the need to have to provide customers with expedient data and systems on a regular basis. So when our trade secret partners, industry partners that we regulate come to the table, they need immediate responses on data. And so we need to test it to the fullest limits. That goes back to the whole architecture discussion. Knowing how to find all the holes and places to plug them in is going to be critical here. I mean, cloud has been touted as the end-all be-all right now. But now let's test it and see how well it actually performs for us.
Yeah, Stephen, sounds like you've got that same question.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're working through, and I love the commentary here. And, cloud's the end-all, be-all. I tell you, some of the real winners in this cloud race are the telecom companies because, wow, we've taken the data center-centric model, if you will, and turned it inside out. The data center used to be in the middle. We kind of built network and access around it, then we put security around it. We built out. What cloud's done is essentially said, say, rip the data center out from the middle of the org and throw it over here on the outside, and now re-engineer your networks and your security to go get it. What that means now is all that traffic that was internal to your organization is now crossing the edge out across the internet to get to your cloud provider. And that pipe that may have been 1 gig or 2 gigs, well, geez, that now needs to be the 10 gigs or whatever you needed at the data center level. And cloud providers, some of them offer like direct connect access for a fee, of course. And something else we have to be cognizant of is even those data centers in the cloud, they have an East Coast presence, they have a West Coast presence, they have an international presence. These have impacts on your latency, your bandwidth, and your performance. Some of our investigators, when they go out and they do a search and seizure for healthcare fraud, one of the most recent cases, they pulled in 136 terabytes of data on a single search warrant. Okay. Now imagine trying to shove that through even a 10 gig pipe to a cloud provider. Okay. For us, there's trade-offs here. And we have to ask ourselves, what's the trade-off between putting it out in a cloud provider and trying to shove everything through, or even ship it out there via drive and then try to access it and process it that way, versus, geez, maybe I should put SANs on site, run a fiber, a fixed cost between my analysts and that location, and crunch it that way. And it really comes down to a business decision: performance, business, and cost. What am I going to do?
So it might be that in the long run you would save money by an investment, say, in storage locally, or like you mentioned, a storage area network locally. May seem like an upfront cost, but over the long run, if you consider carrier costs and telecom, you might actually save.
Absolutely.
All right, Raj, that gets me to thinking of, years ago at SIGGRAPH, the big, the graphics show, the big breakthrough was when they could take a visualization of a head and turn it 360 degrees. That was, wow, they could finally do that, and screensavers flipped all the way over. Today we have visualization with, as Stephen said, 136 terabytes in a given file, and many, many agencies are visualizing with their data. So you can imagine maybe the pressure test is, can I visualize in California from data that's based in Massachusetts over a pipeline and all of this? What are you seeing in terms of the technology approaches to making that kind of, I guess you'd call it, agility and high processing possible over cloud and hybrid networks?
So it's really interesting, and I think the comments that were actually brought up before, effectively to net it out, your end users, right, your employees are saying, we have the expectation of on-prem and all the latency requirements, all the performance requirements. Now, if you want to move the cloud, knock yourself out, that's great, right? If it's the be-all and end-all for you, go for it. But at the end of the day, our expectations are set. Whether it's our applications, whether it's access, what have you, it's all been set. And it's an interesting point that was brought up before about changes in overall, call it network topology, and is it inside out or is it right side up? Which way does it go? I think that's continuing to evolve, because as you start to separate things, what you start to realize is that from a security perspective, you've just increased your attack vectors. You've now just said, hey, instead of having one central corpus of data that I need to protect, and I can instill and I can surround with a number of protection points, I've now separated that. And I think that those are the dynamic tension that exists and will continue to remain, and will actually be the piece that's going to determine a lot of what the end result looks like. From our perspective, we are looking at, we have technologies that currently allow you to transfer data in a very effective fashion, and that's something. And these are all tools, right? These are tools that allow your agency and your organization to determine how do we want to architect this solution, knowing the fact that it's never just one point that you need to address. There is a litany of issues that go into making any decision, and from our perspective, we want to make it as easy as possible in order to address them. So whether that means having a location on the East Coast and a location on the West Coast, but still owning and protecting your data and allowing that to transfer back and forth, part of the benefits that are afforded are the fact that you now, at least whatever's on the East and whatever's on the West, look the same. So even if you've got multiple approaches to solve even if you have multiple, call them attack vectors in places where your data is stored, the process that your internal organization is following to secure them is consistent. And now it becomes almost, I don't want to minimize the effort that goes into securing a system and saying it's cookie cutter, but it does reduces the variability, but still provides all of the benefits that we talked about before.
Darren, we know this is possible. I just take the example of email. We've all got our own personal cloud account, and we all have our Microsoft Outlook account where we work. And you do a search on the local Microsoft Outlook, and 45 seconds later you get an answer, and in the morning sometimes 60, 90 seconds to load. You go on to your, let's say, it's a letter high up in the alphabet, mail, and you've maybe got 50,000 messages there, and they're there the second you log on, and you can search anywhere back 10 years in there, which is my case. I've had it that long, and that search comes up in 1 second. Even before you're done typing, it comes up. So we know it's possible. What are they doing right? What are we doing wrong locally that maybe could be transferred, so that we get these kinds of architectural decisions made?
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up as an example, because one of the things that I think is interesting is you look at what Amazon and Google and eBay, what they do in their model and how they make it work. And one thing that Google actually did when they looked at latency in their environment, they actually, in their entire production environment, they did some testing of the latency of applications, and what the resolution that they had was they actually rewrote their TCP stack. So I don't think the federal government's going to want to go and start rewriting the TCP stacks for all this stuff, because that's just not the way that the government can actually work, right? But they rewrote their TCP stack, and that reduced their median latency by 23% in their entire enterprise networks, and that's a significant number. So what we really do is there's WAN optimization, for example. That's one of those things that we learned 10, 15 years ago. WAN optimization started growing as a technology because of the centralization from all the branch offices into the data center. When the data center started getting bigger, there was no way to maintain that performance at the branch when their applications were at the data center without something in between. It was caching, WAN optimization, something like that. And so there's a lot of really good technologies out there. Data locality is going to matter, and that's where the distribution of data matters to reduce the latency. Good thing is a lot of cloud service providers have content delivery platforms within their cloud services. The big problem is most of them aren't FedRAMP approved yet.
Correct.
So it's there, but it's not there yet.
Yeah, Walter.
Yeah, but another side of latency is also something we think about on a regular basis at FDA, which is DR, disaster recovery. The key is going to be, if you're going to give your business all out to a cloud service provider, then if something, especially for us, since we have organizations dispersed all over the country and outside of the country, how fast do we come back to normal business when this happens? So that's one big question we all need to kind of put our heads together around and try to address.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up, especially for FDA. You do have inspectors all over the world, and you're inspecting food facilities and healthcare manufacturing facilities that for anybody that ships anything to the United States, you've got somebody there. So what kind of tools are you looking for as you go down this pathway of optimizing your highly hybrid environment that you described earlier?
We have not figured it all out yet. We are looking at trying to take FDA in the direction of doing just that. And I think forums like this, talk with smart people like Darren and his organizations will help us get there. What we are currently doing is, again, we've tried to look at our entire environment and decide what should be in certain places and what should not. And we're working through that. We have a really exhaustive plan going on right now for DR. But that's with the current state. It's when we go future state of really going fully cloud that we have to figure out. So we don't have the answers. We're looking for them. Hopefully you can tell us, Tom.
Well, I'll try to figure it out. Yeah, Darren, how should customers approach this in the first place?
Well, one thing I like to say, so in this cloud model, SLAs really drive the conversation. And you're not going to get the box huggers to let go of the box unless there's an SLA that has a financial or some sort of reason for you to maintain that SLA, right? That's the only way you're going to get the box huggers to let go of the box and move stuff to the cloud. There are definitely good use cases for DR and all that stuff. And at a former company that I worked at, when we were trying to solve this problem, we actually developed a dual data center design within a lab environment that we tied into Amazon Web Services. And we had to use beta test or beta code from CA, part of their automation suite for clouds, beta code from F5, beta code from VMware, and configure it and put it all together in a manner that was not supported by any of the vendors at the time. And that was the only way you could actually do it, to have loads bring up into a load balance pool. And if you were in risk of violating your SLA, it would spin something up in Amazon and all that kind of stuff. You maintain those SLAs. So the technologies were there, but they weren't that mature. Today, they are mature. So you can do it, but it is complex. It has a lot of business value conversations and costs and risk and all that stuff. But at least the technology is getting there, so you can meet some of those use cases for COOP and DR and all that stuff.
Yeah, so Harry, how are you approaching this? Because you have applications and data, as we've mentioned. Applications, the logic is relatively small and light compared to the data that it calls on. And Census has lots of applications and many, many data sets. So what are you looking for in terms of tools and help and support to get all this in some kind of cogent manner?
Let's talk about help first. We like to think we're pretty smart at Census about technology. We are smart about technology, but we don't know it all. So we have an expert firm that that's consulting with us. They're not a broker, not a cloud service provider, but they do help federal agencies get out to the cloud and procure cloud services. So we have quite a few use cases, and to me it's about the timing of the demand and the specificity of the need. We're looking at all those use cases and looking at a target state architecture that we want to build to. We collect data, we process data, we store data, we disseminate data. So we're in the data business. We conduct surveys and censuses. So one of the key things we're looking at is how do we leverage cloud for the collection of data, specifically when we have peaks in demand based on the cyclical nature of our censuses and surveys. So we're looking at the need for DR and for backup. It's about flexibility and scalability of when we have that need. So there's just a lot of things going on. We want to be smart about how we get there. And I think we're doing pretty good.
All right, we're going to take a break on that note and come back in just a moment. Our guests today are Harry Lee, the Deputy Chief Information Officer at the Census Bureau, Walter Harris, the Chief Operating Officer of the FDA, Darren House is the Chief Technology Officer at Microtech and the former Director of Technology Solutions at Avnet Government Solutions, Raj Rana, the Senior Systems Engineering Manager for Partner Ecosystems at NetApp, and Stephen Hernandez, the Chief Information Security Officer at the Office of Inspector General at Health and Human Services. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. This is Data-Centric Approaches to Government in the Cloud, sponsored by Avnet Government Solutions and NetApp, here on federalnewsradio.com and Federal News Radio 1500 AM.